So, as I said at the beginning of our time together, this was quite a week that all of us have made our way through together. And I will be honest and tell you that I'm getting a little bit tired of being assigned to come to this pulpit and share some meager words of inadequate encouragement to you after we've made our way struggling through one unavoidable disaster or another. When I was preparing for tonight, I halfway wished that I had set up a separate folder on my computer for all of these sermons for hurricanes and floods and acts of violence and terrorism and political upheaval. And here we are again with yet another opportunity to try to make sense of something that is senseless. Once again, we're here together on a Shabbat from wherever we are to mourn our losses and say some prayers of gratitude that most of us have come through a difficult time together. And what's especially exhausting is that we've arrived at this Shabbat after having seen the gaps in our civic infrastructure and in our social safety nets. We've seen those gaps and known they were there for a very, very long time. But nevertheless, we had to sit by and watch as people fell through those cracks this week. I know that all of you share my sense of exhaustion and frustration as well. On a somewhat more positive note, what I'm not getting tired of, though, despite the difficulties that we seem to be making our way through together on a regular basis, is a different part of the regular and dependable cycle that follows after a disaster or tragedy. And that is that soon after the word goes out and the news coverage begins to spread, people step forward to help. It happens all the time, and with every year that passes, we get better at it. With every rotation of the news cycle, the aid and support comes faster and in larger measures and is delivered more effectively. About that part of our communal life together, I am not yet cynical or jaded. In fact, I am touched and inspired. As I've said to you on numerous occasions in the past, there is this amazing thing that you notice when you become part of a regularly observant Jewish community, and that is that the Torah portion for any given week seems to deliver precisely the message that you need the most whenever it comes time to study its words on any given Shabbat or holiday. This week, the Torah portion relates a story in which God tells Moses to solicit the people for donations to support the community, to help build the wilderness tabernacle, a portable sanctuary in which the Israelites will offer their sacrifices. Tell them to bring me gifts, God says, and build a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Immediately after that, Moses invites the people to give, and the donations start rolling in. And you may know the rest of the story. The children of Israel were so selfless and so generous that they gave far more than was required of them, and Moses had to tell them to stop, because the donations had so far overwhelmed the needs of the community and its sanctuary. The portion seems to be written in a way that's designed to be read as hyperbole. When, after all, do charitable donations ever exceed a community's need? But this week, those who gave, those who sent and donated tzedakah, to assist those in need, may have been even more praiseworthy than our ancestors in the wilderness, because this week, people gave without needing to be asked. People responded instinctively and wholeheartedly when they saw that people were suffering and in pain. In other years, when I've read this portion and the commentaries that accompany it, it sometimes struck me as funny the way that the rabbis responded so rapturously to the passages about the gifts that the ancient Israelites gave. Red yarn and goat hair, shiny stones and loaves of bread. Were the donations thoughtful? Yes, absolutely. But I always had a chuckle about the fact that the donation of a lump of wool was praised so breathlessly by the classic commentators. But I have to say that now, after living through another disaster for which our statewide infrastructure and supply chains were unprepared, now I get it. Gifts that we once saw as mundane have taken on new meaning and new value. A bottle of clean water, a roll of toilet paper, the extraordinary luxury of being allowed to use a neighbor's shower or charge your phone from their generator. The Bible uses the Hebrew phrase nadiv lev, which we might translate as a heart giver, to describe a person who gives selflessly. A heart giver is a person who sees a need and responds instinctively with generosity and openness. Like I said earlier, I have already had more than enough on-the-job training about crisis management and disaster relief. All of us have had more than we need. But this week we learned about what it means to be a heart giver, to have this sort of generous spirit, because that sort of spirit was offered again and again by countless good souls throughout the community. Look, in every time of crisis, it helps to have resources. It helps to be a person of privilege. This week was no different. Your experience during these past few days in the power outages, the storm, the freezing temperatures, your experience would have been demonstrably different if you, for example, could pay the inflated price for a hotel room when you needed to. Or if you had had the wherewithal at some point to harden your home against extreme weather. But privilege and material possessions couldn't insulate anyone completely from the storm this week. The only thing that could keep us reliably and comfortably safe was community. That's the thing that will always protect us. A snug web of interconnected relationships and mutual concern. That includes the neighbors across the street and the generous hearts far away as well, colleagues and friends, relatives who called and texted and messaged and tweeted when the news about this week's crisis arrived in their homes. To those of you who supported us, who reached out with care and concern, we thank you. We see you. And that's not all that we've seen this week. We've seen examples of what true tzedakah looks like, and we've seen examples of what true leadership looks like. This week we noticed who stepped up, and we noticed who stepped back. We saw who shared their resources, who used their resources and their relationships and their influence to help. And we also saw who drew their circle of care and concern tighter around themselves and their own immediate concerns. And I think we will continue to see, when it comes time for our city and our state to make sustainable long-term decisions about what will preserve the world we leave for the generations to come, we will see and we will be watching. There is a medieval commentary on this week's portion about the donations of yarn and wool and bread, which puts a mystical spin on the text. This commentary suggests that each one who donated a gift imbued that gift almost magically with some of his or her own character. When someone gave a loaf of bread lovingly, that gift injected more love into the sanctuary. If someone gave their skein of wool stingily, that injected more stinginess and hard-heartedness into the community. Every gift that we give imbues the world in which we live with a hint of our own character. When we give lovingly, we inject more love. When we give or withhold self-centeredly, we put more egotism and selfishness in. A gift is never just a gift. A loaf of bread is never just a loaf of bread. It is an expression of our belief in the human capacity to give and to heal, to repair and to lift up. One of my Christian colleagues earlier this week commented that although we were without electricity this week, we were not without power. It's a great reminder about what potency looks like, what strength and power looks like from the web of spiritual relationships we weave together. Our community is lifted up and fortified by the strength of our connections, by the power of our mutual concern, by the fortitude of our commitment to use what we have to protect those who don't have. Friends, tonight it is Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath before the holiday of Purim, the holiday of remembering. And it's called that because the season invites us to recall the deeds of years past, to remember the forces that nearly destroyed us, but to remember as well those who stepped up to help, to give what they had to protect those in need. Friends, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a week of peace and of safety. I want to wish you a week ahead of care and tranquility and security. And I want to encourage all of you to remember what is important, to remember those who depend on us, to remember the myriad ways in which we can support this community, to be what the Bible calls a nediv lev, to spend these days ahead by being heart givers to ourselves, to our community, and to a world in desperate need of repair. Shabbat Shalom, friends.